Forget Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, forget every billionaire you've ever heard of. Because the richest person to ever walk this planet wasn't some tech guy in a suit. It was a man who couldn't read, couldn't write, and started with literally nothing. I'm talking about Genghis Khan. And what he built makes every modern fortune look like pocket change. But here's the crazy part. Nobody talks about his money. Everyone knows he was brutal. Everyone knows he conquered half the known world. But almost nobody has actually broken down what all that conquering was worth. So today, we're doing the math. And trust me, the numbers are going to blow your mind. We're going to look at exactly how Genghis Khan went from a homeless kid on the Mongolian plains to controlling more wealth than any human being before or since. And we're going to figure out what his empire would actually be worth in today's dollars. So let's get into it. First, you need to understand where Genghis Khan came from, because this wasn't some prince who inherited his daddy's kingdom. This was a kid named Temujin, born around 1162 in the middle of nowhere, Mongolia. His dad was a minor tribal chief. Not rich, not powerful, just another guy trying to survive on the steppes. And when Temujin was about 9 years old, his dad got poisoned by a rival tribe. Just like that, his family was abandoned. His tribe literally left them to disappear. So picture this. A widow with her kids, no food, no protection, no shelter, surviving on roots and small animals in one of the harshest climates on earth. That's where Genghis Khan started. Not in a palace, not with an army, with nothing. He even had to vanish his own half-brother over food when he was a teenager. That's how desperate things were. So how did this starving kid become the richest man in history? Here's where it gets interesting. Temujin was different. He had this ability to bring people together. He didn't just conquer tribes, he absorbed them. When he beat someone, he didn't wipe them out like everyone else did. He gave them a choice. Join me, and you'll share in everything we take. Or fight me, and you'll lose everything. Most people chose to join, and that's actually the first lesson in his wealth-building strategy. He understood that people are the real asset. Every person who joined his army was a soldier, a worker, a producer. He wasn't burning down his future income, he was recruiting it. By the time he unified the Mongol tribes in 1206, he had built something no one had ever seen before. A massive army that was completely loyal to him personally. Not to a tribe, not to a piece of land, to him. And that's when the real money started flowing. Now here's where we need to talk about the Mongol economy. Because most people think Genghis Khan just destroyed everything. And yeah, he definitely destroyed a lot. But he was also one of the smartest economic minds of his era. See, the Mongols were nomads. They didn't farm. They didn't have factories. They had horses, sheep, and goats. So how do you get rich without producing anything? You take from people who do. But here's the genius part. Genghis Khan didn't just raid and run. He set up a system. His first major target was the Jin dynasty in northern China. Now the Jin were filthy rich. We're talking about one of the wealthiest civilizations on the planet at the time. They had silk, they had gold, they had jade, they had everything, and Genghis Khan wanted it all. The campaign against the Jin started in 1211. Within 3 years, the Mongols had captured most of northern China. And the wealth that poured into Mongol hands was insane. We're talking literal mountains of gold and silver, warehouses full of silk, millions of livestock, grain supplies that could feed armies for years. But here's what most people miss. Genghis Khan didn't just loot and leave. He started demanding tribute, annual payments. Think of it like taxes, except you are paying them to someone who will literally vanish everyone in your city if you don't. The Jin dynasty started sending regular shipments of gold, silk, and grain to the Mongols. This wasn't a one-time robbery. This was a subscription service. And that's just China. Let's talk about the Silk Road. The Silk Road was basically the Amazon of the ancient world. It was the main trade route connecting Europe to Asia. Spices, silk, gold, precious stones, everything valuable moved along this road. Before the Mongols, this road was fragmented. Dozens of different kingdoms and empires each controlled their own little section. And every single one of them charged fees and taxes. So if you wanted to move goods from China to Europe, you were paying off like 30 different governments along the way. That made trade expensive and risky. Genghis Khan changed that. When he conquered the Khwarezmian Empire in 1219, he didn't just add another territory, he connected the entire Silk Road under one government. His government. For the first time in history, a single ruler controlled the entire trade route from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. Think about what that means. Every single piece of silk, every bag of spices, every ounce of gold moving between Asia and Europe had to go through Mongol territory, and Genghis Khan got a cut of all of it. Historians call this period the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, and it created a trade boom like the world had never seen. Merchants who used to need armed guards and had to pay dozens of bribes could now travel safely across the entire continent. Trade volume exploded, and all that increased trade meant more taxes, more tribute, and more wealth flowing to the Mongols. Now let's talk about land. Because Genghis Khan didn't just conquer people, he conquered territory. At its peak, the Mongol Empire covered about 9 million square miles. That's bigger than any empire in history. Bigger than Rome, bigger than Britain, bigger than anything. Now let's put that in perspective. Today, Russia is the biggest country in the world at about 6.5 million square miles. Genghis Khan controlled almost 50% more than that. And this wasn't empty wasteland. This was some of the most valuable real estate on the planet. He controlled the grasslands of Mongolia, perfect for raising horses and livestock. He controlled the farmlands of China, the most productive agricultural region in the world at the time. He controlled the trading cities of Central Asia, where merchants had been getting rich for centuries. He controlled Persia, which had been wealthy since ancient times, and he controlled parts of Eastern Europe, including Russia. Every single piece of this territory was generating income. Taxes from farmers, tribute from conquered kings, trade fees from merchants, and straight-up plunder from anyone who resisted. So what was all this actually worth? This is where things get really interesting. Because obviously, we don't have Genghis Khan's bank statements. But historians and economists have tried to estimate his total wealth. And the numbers are absolutely ridiculous. Some estimates say the Mongol Empire's total GDP was over $100 billion in today's money. But that's just the economy. That's not his personal wealth. See, in the Mongol system, there wasn't really a separation between the empire's money and the Khan's money. Everything belonged to him. Every horse, every soldier, every piece of gold, every conquered territory. He could do whatever he wanted with it. So if we count everything he personally controlled, we're looking at something like $200 to $300 billion, minimum. But honestly, that number might be way too low. Because how do you even value controlling a quarter of all the land on Earth? If you count the land itself, the natural resources, the trade routes, and everything else, some historians argue his real wealth was closer to several $1 trillion. To put that in context, Elon Musk, the richest person alive today, is worth around $600 billion. Genghis Khan might have been worth 10 times that, or more. And remember, this was 800 years ago, when the global economy was a tiny fraction of what it is today. He controlled a bigger percentage of the world's total wealth than anyone has before or since. But here's the thing that really separates Genghis Khan from modern billionaires. His wealth wasn't paper value. It wasn't stock prices that could crash tomorrow. It was physical stuff, actual gold, actual land, actual armies of people who would disappear for him. You can't short sell a Mongol horse cavalry. Let me give you some specific examples of the loot he captured. When the Mongols sacked the city of Urgench in Central Asia, they reportedly took so much treasure that it required over 100,000 camels just to carry it all away. 100,000 camels. A single camel can carry about 400 pounds. So we're talking about 40 million pounds of treasure from one city. When they captured Samarkand, one of the richest trading cities in the world, the same thing happened. Warehouses full of gold, silver, gems, and silk. All of it loaded onto wagons and sent back to Mongolia. The city of Herat in modern Afghanistan reportedly paid 10 million dinars just in its initial ransom, and then kept paying tribute for years after. City after city Kingdom after kingdom, it all added up. And it wasn't just physical wealth, it was also human capital. The Mongols were smart enough to recognize skilled people. When they conquered a city, they didn't just take the gold. They took the craftsmen, the engineers, the doctors, the scribes. Anyone with valuable skills got shipped back to Mongolia, or assigned to serve the empire. This was like acquiring entire companies, not just their products, but their best employees too. Genghis Khan built what we'd now call a knowledge economy, centuries before anyone else figured it out. He brought Chinese engineers to build siege weapons, Persian administrators to manage finances, Islamic scholars to keep records. He was basically running the world's first multinational corporation, and he knew how to keep his people motivated. Unlike most rulers who hoarded everything for themselves, Genghis Khan actually distributed the wealth. His generals got rich, his soldiers got rich, even regular troops got their share of plunder. This created loyalty you couldn't buy any other way. When your boss makes you wealthy, you fight harder for him. The modern equivalent would be like if Amazon gave every warehouse worker $1 million in stock. You'd have the most motivated workforce in history. That's basically what Genghis Khan did, and it worked. His army was fanatically loyal because they all benefited from the system. Now, some people might be thinking, okay, but he was a monster. And yeah, let's be real about that. The Mongol conquests erased somewhere between 30 and 40 million people. Maybe more. Some historians say up to 60 million. That's about 10 to 15% of the entire world population at the time. Entire cities were wiped off the map. Regions that had been populated for thousands of years became empty. Rivers were reportedly choked with bodies. In terms of pure destruction, nothing in history comes close except maybe World War II, and that's with modern weapons. Genghis Khan did it with swords, arrows, and horses. So we're not saying he was a good guy. He wasn't. But we are looking at his wealth, and you can't deny that he accumulated more of it than anyone else in human history. His methods were brutal, but they were also incredibly effective. The wealth he gathered was so massive that it changed the world's economy. All that gold and silver that the Mongols pulled out of Asian cities started circulating through global trade. It helped fund the commercial revolution in Europe. It increased the money supply across the entire Eastern Hemisphere. Some economists argue that the Mongol conquest helped lay the groundwork for modern capitalism by connecting previously isolated economies. So in a weird way, your ability to buy stuff on Amazon today is partly connected to what Genghis Khan did 8 centuries ago. Now let's talk about what happened to all that wealth. Genghis Khan disappeared in 1227. Nobody knows exactly how. Some say he fell off a horse, some say he was wounded in battle, some say he was erased by a captured princess. Whatever happened, his empire kept growing after his disappearing. His sons and grandsons expanded it even further. Kublai Khan, his grandson, eventually conquered all of China and established the Yuan dynasty. The empire peaked around 1279, about 50 years after Genghis Khan's disappearing. At that point, the Mongols controlled China, Korea, Central Asia, Persia, parts of India, Russia, and were knocking on the doors of Europe. The wealth was almost beyond counting. The Yuan dynasty alone was minting more money than any government in history. They had so much silver that they actually invented paper money because carrying all those coins was too inconvenient. Paper money. The Mongols basically invented the thing that makes the modern economy work. And for a while it worked great. Trade was booming, the empire was stable, money was flowing. But here's the thing about empires. They always fall. The Mongol Empire started fragmenting in the early 1300s. Different factions started fighting each other. The Black Disappearing swept through and erased huge portions of the population. Rebellions broke out everywhere. By 1400, the empire was basically done. The wealth that Genghis Khan had accumulated got scattered across a dozen successor states. Some of it went to the Chinese, some of it went to the Persians, some of it went to the Russians, and a lot of it just got lost or destroyed. Today, there's basically nothing left of Genghis Khan's personal fortune. No treasure vaults, no secret stashes. His site has never been found. Legend says that everyone who attended searching for him was erased to keep the location secret. Somewhere in Mongolia, there might be a tomb filled with the personal treasures of the richest man in history. But no one knows where it is, so what's the takeaway here? Genghis Khan went from being a homeless kid eating rats on the Mongolian plains to controlling more wealth than any human being before or since. He did it through military conquest, yeah, but also through smart economics. He understood the value of trade, he understood the importance of human capital, he understood that loyal people are worth more than piles of gold. He created systems that continued generating wealth long after any individual battle was won. Was he evil? By modern standards, absolutely. He was responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. But was he successful? In terms of pure wealth accumulation, nobody has ever come close. 200 billion, maybe a trillion, maybe more. All from a kid who started with nothing. That's the story of Genghis Khan, the richest man who ever lived. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button.